Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to speak just briefly about the meeting of the Finance Committee this morning. Those of you who were there had the joy of spending your morning there on your way to here. But we dealt with topics of, I would consider, significance, real significance for us going forward this year, having to do with our response to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed in Washington just over a year ago. We talked about conformity and acted on it. We talked about a couple of major alternatives, and we also had the presence of Finance Secretary Elaine, who gave us his observations and represented the administration's positions on various measures before us. Let me say a few things about what came before us. No doubt there will be others who want to address this, but as I said to the committee, I appreciated both the spirited and substantial conversation that we had. We covered some very important topics, and I think, although I'm confident not everyone there was pleased with all of the outcome, I think we have done substantial work that will show up on the floor. Let me note a couple of things that we considered. One was House Bill 2533, which is the annual conformity bill. And with its passage, albeit with a little bit differently configured vote than we often have in committee, it comes to the floor and had substantial support. I would expect, based on conversations I've had on both sides of the aisle, that support will only grow as time goes forward. One new provision, in addition to the ordinary elements of the annual conformity bill, is that it provides for a taxpayer protection fund that will be established from new revenues that we receive out of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act in the event that we are unable to come to an agreement how to dispose or disperse those funds as a body. That will be there and will be available to us in that event. I hope we can come to an agreement, and I would note that the two principal proponents of the bills that came forward this morning both indicated their willingness. They said this is not the final word. They are willing to work together going forward to come up with something that has broad agreement. Importantly, conformity moves forward. Today is the day that the tax department is accepting returns in Virginia, federal government the same way, so it is important that we move this forward at this point. I would note that when it comes to the floor, it will require 80% approval, so that's an important thing for you to be thinking about as we come forward. As I say, there were two principal proposals that were presented. I'm going to speak to one of them. Both came with 12 to 10 votes. One was favored, 12 to 10. The other one was not favored, and it was a 10 to 12, just a reversal. There may well be someone who will speak on that bill. Let me indicate I cast my vote in favor of House Bill 2525, which has two major provisions. And I want to address a couple things about it that maybe haven't been as underlined as clearly as they might have been. House Bill 2529 has two major provisions. The first, and the one that affects every single taxpayer in the Commonwealth, is a provision that would increase the standard deduction. It's a modest increase, but it is increased. And in the nature of things, this part of the bill helps everybody who uses a standard deduction. That would be 2.7 million Virginians out of the 4 million taxpayers that we had last year, just to give you a sense of its sweep. And this is important. Contrary to some assertions, a standard deduction will help those at the lowest rungs of the tax code, and they proportionately will get a better assistance. There are over 1 million people who have revenue or have income of $50,000 or less. Proportionately, they gain the most from a standard deduction increase. The second part of House Bill 2529 will allow itemization for Virginia taxpayers who, for a variety of reasons, choose not to itemize at the federal level, the most important reason for which the feds have essentially doubled the standard deduction. With that doubling, there are a lot of people further on down in the tax-paying ranks that will probably choose, failing to have this itemization option, to go to the standard deduction. Now, this, again, I think requires clarification. Wealthy people who itemize are going to do it anyhow. People at the upper ranks, at the upper reaches in taxation, they're going to itemize. They have the resources to do this. It's the people like the ones we were just talking about when Delegate Landis was speaking of teachers. The average pay for a teacher in Virginia, according to the VEA, at least I was looking very quickly, the average pay that I saw, and I think this may have been a 2017 figure, was $51,000. Let's just think, and I can think of a dozen right off the top of my head, of couples where you got two teachers that have been teaching for some time, and they make salaries probably in that range. If you have two people in that circumstance, and you have this second provision that allows them to itemize, the chances are pretty darn good that it may make sense for them to itemize. Now, are those wealthy people? No, I don't think so. Those are ordinary, hardworking teachers, and you can multiply that across various vocations. They will be able, under this bill, HB 2529, to deduct their mortgage interest. That's important, and it might well not be able to be done on any other alternative. I would also say to my friends in Northern Virginia, an important provision in this bill is that it provides for SALT, deductions for state and local taxation. Many of you in Northern Virginia have had neighbors come to you, I'm confident, to say, if this is not in there, it is going to be a problem for me. I'm going to be paying a lot more. Those are a couple of the things that I wanted to emphasize. I'm sure there'll be further discussion, but I'm grateful to all the members of the Finance Committee for their involvement and their civil debate on a very significant topic. And I'm very pleased to say that Delegate Sullivan even said to me about this conversation that we had today, it was fun.